First, I will introduce our guests. Mr. István Horváth is the director of the Minority Studies Research Institute in Cluj-Napoca, or in Hungarian Kolozsvár in Romania. He is our first and keynote speaker. And as invited guest, we invited Híres László Cornélia from Ukraine. We made a common research together in the Slovakian-Hungarian borderland area. What results I will present. And my name is László Letenyei. I am a Corvinus University teacher, and that is the research program about linguistic landscape in England, what we will introduce you today. So, István, let's start.
Okay, so I think that I have to offer you a context on what is this linguistic landscape issue. So I will start with this image. So this image has a very clear textual meaning. Who knows Hungarian and Romanian? Maybe I'm the only one here. But who knows, he will see that you have the words in both languages, Hungarian and Romanian. But if you observe more carefully, you might see that there is some kind of official inscription there in two languages which are very symmetric, and there you have in Hungarian not so official inscriptions. And what is this from the point of view of linguistic landscape? It's very simple. The linguistic meaning, the textual meaning, you can find out with a dictionary. You can take a look. What does it mean? Könyvtár. No, library. Okay, that's library. This is the text. But the research on linguistic landscape, it is, what is the social meaning of this? We are in a setting in Romania which is multilingual. Practically it's there in a place where the majority of the population is Hungarian, though it's placed in Romania. So practically you have a kind of a linguistic landscape regulation coming from top down, regulating, saying that all the major institutions have to have inscription in official state language. But you will see around the official inscription one in Hungarian, which is the first one and not the second one. And there in behind you will see something, Községháza is written, which give another meaning. So practically it marking the place, the institution, as an institution where Hungarians are in majority. You will have also the informal inscriptions of orientation. There are only in Hungarian. So practically what is here, the textual meaning, it is very clear. You have some boards, some elements of language orienting people in a space of a locality. But on the other hand, you have a kind of a social meaning that this type of arrangement, the frequency with which the Hungarian linguistic signs are appearing, the order of the inscription, and different other aspects are revealing something deeper than the textual meaning. It is sending a message on the social meaning of the inscription, transmitting a message that here, from the bottom-up regulation, it's articulating a different sense. This place is in Romania, but it is dominated by Hungarians. Hungarians are in majority. So instead of having a formal definition of what linguistic landscape is, I was just willing to present you linguistic landscape. It's about studying of the texts, but not simple at the level of the public science and text, but not simply on the level of the textual informational meaning, but trying to find out the deeper social meanings of the frequency of the words used in different languages, of the orders of the texts, of the different strategies of highlighting the importance of different types of text. So practically, it is about space, but it is also about spatial relations, it is about the presence of a certain group, and it is also about seeing what is the relation between these groups. So practically, to understand this project, it is much more about consumption, and which can be seen as less politicized aspect of the linguistic landscape. Usually the more politicized aspect of linguistic landscape are about official inscriptions, are about street signs, are about different marks that are regulated by state policy, for instance, the locality's name in the entrance. In what language are those written? But so, regardless of this, I can tell you that each aspect of the linguistic landscape can be politicized, even the consumption. Look there, do you know what is Liberty Sandwich? Do you have ever eaten Liberty Sandwich? I'm sure that you have. Liberty Sandwich, it is the name for hamburger. But after the First World War in United States, a strong policy against the public presence of German language started, and in some states the use of German words in public space were forbidden. So one of the German words were the generic name for a food, hamburger. And then in order to erase this word, they renamed the hamburger as Liberty Sandwich. So practically in different elements of public inscription, not even the name hamburger was present. So practically even the consumption can be highly politicized. Of course, it's more politicized in the case of the different official or officially regulated markings, which are not related to consumption, to market, but there are elements marking a certain state institution, a certain public institution, elements that are directly related to power and exercise of power. Because inscriptions are highlighting also who is the master here, relations of dominance, equality, and other aspects. So practically, you might see that, of course, this can have only a symbolic meaning. Symbols are kind of stupidity. Well, I have to announce you that I see that I have to put some more context here. These symbols can lead to bloody conflictual relations. In 1919, in a city of Transylvania, which is in Romania, the city is Târgu Mureș-Marosvásárhely. In March 1919, there were 6 people killed in bloody clashes between Hungarians and Romanians, representing roughly half and half of the city. The tensions were rising out for months, but the tensions escalated to violence with a very simple gesture. The largely monolingualized city of Târgu Mureș, which monolingualized means Romanian inscriptions were only allowed during communist regime, Hungarians posted for a drugstore the Hungarian name, which generated in first violences. So practically bilingual inscriptions can kill. And apparently symbolical issues can lead to rather harsh conflicts between persons, communities and institutions. So practically what I'm trying to do here it is to present this context and to present the larger context, some aspects from Romania on bilingual policies, bilingual linguistic landscape. What is interesting that the politics of monolingualization that I presented in relation with hamburger are not very rare. Different states in different contexts can impose monolingualization, and they will start always with different types of inscription. In Transylvania during the 50s and 60s, there were largely Hungarian language inscriptions. For those who don't know Transylvania, it was at that period 1.6 million large Hungarian population, and this population was largely concentrated in different areas, so they have a significant presence in certain areas of Transylvania. So practically it started the process of monolingualization starting with the end of the 60s, which led to some level of paroxysm in the sense that even at the end of in the second half of the 80s, the use of the geographic and localities name in Hungarian, in the Hungarian language newspaper was forbidden. So practically even the different names of localities and even the official addresses could be written only in Romanian. So practically not just the linguistic landscape was erased and monolingualized, but also the usage of the geographic names, the name of localities, was limited to only Romanian, even in Hungarian language texts. What started, starting from the 1990s, it was a kind of bilingualization process, which was a kind of self-assertion of Hungarians in public space. It meaning a politics of recognition, for which the foremost symbolic demand was the bilingualization of the linguistic landscape. This process is still ongoing, and this process is still not a very easy one. This picture was taken last week, so 6 days ago. This picture, it is about a bilingual place, which you cannot see the Hungarian version of Toplica, which is Maroshévíz, by the way, because it was painted this way. So the process of bilingualization, as you can see, it is still not lacking any troubles, not lacking any tensions. And why is this problematic? Well, I will introduce just two words which maybe are familiar, maybe not, two words coming from the linguistic anthropology. It is indexicality or iconization. It is simple that linguistic marks, public linguistic marks, are not just simple, have not just one layer of meaning, of, let's say, informative meaning. They have a symbolic meaning, and they function as icons in a certain sense. This linguistic feature, for instance, a bilingual inscription sending to a locality, it's written in Maroshévíz, it is a kind of indicative for a presence. And it's acting like somehow depicting or displaying the group nature and essence. So practically the fact that is written in a locality in Hungarian, it is a kind of symbolically represented much more. It's iconic. It's say that here are Hungarians. These Hungarians are not just presence, they are somehow recognized because the locality's name or the institution name, it is written also in their names. Moreover, in some and many cases, you have even more than just a kind of recognition and some kind of, let's say, prestige of that community. It is much more, in social linguistics we say, functional allocation. What does this mean? Well, for instance, if you enter to a municipality where you have written in Hungarian language the name of the institution, local council or city hall, then you know that you can choose to use Hungarian language. So practically, it's not just the abstract recognition, but linguistic functions are allocated in that institution in many cases. So practically, it orients the language choice of the persons. So on one hand, of course, it's iconically, it's representing the community, a certain sign written in a certain language. It represents those speakers, it's signaling the presence of those speakers. The fact that it's written, and it is written with the same letters as in official language, it say that it has some value, this community for that, and maybe the language, it can be used in certain circumstances. So practically these three dimensions are very important. From this perspective, of course, sometimes the fact that you have bilingual inscription signifies tendencies of policies of equality, of recognition. But why is interesting, the next image, which is not bilingual, which is written in many languages, it is about a city of Cluj-Napoca or Kolozsvár, where I'm coming from, which have more than 20% of, has at that period when it was written, more than 20% of inhabitants Hungarian speaker, and it's historically considered as a kind of capital city of Hungarians in Transylvania. So practically it used to have majority of Hungarian speakers. What is interesting that when the law which imposed the bilingual inscriptions for certain localities where there is more than 20% of speakers belonging to a linguistic minority, the mayor was a very nationalistic guy, and he refused to post the Hungarian language sign for the city. And what is interesting, he posted greeting signs in every possible language. If you go over there, you will see languages whose speakers are barely appear in the city, but Hungarian. Practically, sometimes erasure and lacking one language can be eloquent if you know the whole context. So practically there are greetings in many languages, but just in Hungarian, not Hungarian, which is the largest presence of non-Romanian speakers. But there are greeted even there in Chinese and in any other languages. So there is a Chinese community, of course, in the city, but compared to the size, it is a kind of small diaspora. So in this sense, lack or presence of the bilingual inscription has a deeper social meaning than it is obvious. To see this type of inscription, it is the European Parliament inscription that is written in every language used and recognized as official in the European Union. So it's clearly highlighting a kind of linguistic policy of equality, of symmetry between different languages, regardless of the number of the speakers, regardless of their status in a linguistic market. Of course, English has a much higher and elevated status than, let's say, Hungarian, who is so courageous to start to learn Hungarian, but everybody starts to learn English. So practically, it is the same recognition. So practically, why is interesting here? Because what I want to highlight here it is that, of course, linguistic signs, their structure, can be understood not just if you look on quantity, on the numbers of the words, but the different types of linguistic configuration can be interpreted in a concrete historical situation, in actual practice. So practically, what I will try to highlight is to show some of such practices, one or two, depending when I will be stopped here, because I have two more examples here, to make you a deeper view of why these types of symbols are so important in Transylvania. What is important that in Transylvania, with a large presence of Hungarians, there is a competitive relation between languages. What does this mean? Well, in both cases, language was seen as a sign of authenticity, of authentically existing political communities that have the right and are entitled to build up a nation, to a kind of autonomous political living. In both cases, who was a titular majority, if the Hungarians before 1918 imposed his language upon the others. In case of Hungarians before 1918, they imposed Hungarian language as a kind of a civic duty. If you want to be a Hungarian citizen, you will learn and you will use Hungarian as in many cases. Reversely, when the rule over Transylvania changed and Transylvania was passed to Romania in 1918, then the same issue happened. Romanians evoking that they are entitled to a national living, they imposed upon Hungarians as a kind of civic duty to speak as much Romanian as possible. So practically, you have these types of competitive relation, you have radical historical turns in this, and somehow this is, of course, a conflict also over territory, but language, it is also a linguistic conflict. There is a language of competition and conflict, so practically linguistic issues in this general context are very sensitive issues in Transylvania. So none of the languages is neutral. I was just giving an example on a concrete question. Maybe a Hungarian shop owner would prefer to use English to make an inscription because for him is a neutral language. So maybe he will not prefer to use Romanian language to post billboards and other stuff. He will choose English. Comparing to communist regime, they conferred rather extensive linguistic rights. Among other, for instance, for significant territorial communities, it means municipalities where a given minority has more than 20%, they can post the different type of official inscription in two languages. They can have the indicators of localities in two languages. So practically comparing to the policies of communist regime, which erased all the Hungarian language aspects, this law suggested an order of rather symmetry. Of course, we are rather equality, a kind of asymmetric equality, in order that these type of regulations are very precise. They say the first inscription is always the Romanian. The Hungarian or other minority inscription cannot be bigger. Has to be the same size or even smaller in some cases. So practically, it offers certain legal space for Hungarian linguistic landscape in official context, but in a certain sense waiting very carefully to keep a kind of asymmetric equality. We are egos, but here the Romanian has a kind of primacy, so it's not challenged the primacy of a Romanian language. Of course, the state-projected order of the official layer of the linguistic landscape, it is not the only one, because you have kind of bottom-up aspiration. What does it mean? The different minority communities want to assert themselves, want to make themselves visible, maybe in other form than it is the state-projected regulation. So practically, and there are different other actors who are considering that this is not good, even that the state-projected regulation is contested, as you've seen by the painted indicator. So practically, on one hand, you have a state-projected order of the linguistic landscape. On the other hand, you have different surfacing initiatives of the different local communities trying to make themselves visible within the linguistic landscape, and practically you have then a kind of interesting equilibrium which is generating a kind of very interesting and continuous conflict. I don't know how visible it is for you, but I want to ask you which one of the pictures it's made in Hungary and which one in Transylvania in Romania. Of course, you will say, many of you will say that when you have a bilingual thing, that is something is written there, Casa Saturui, Községháza, there you have only Községháza. But it's not true, because practically the first one is made in Hungary, the second one in Romania, in Transylvania. So practically you have a rather symmetric configuration. This is in a village where you have there the official inscription with smaller letters in bilingually in Romanian and Hungarian as the law it's imposing. So it's a local council of the municipality of helyi tanács, Danfal, Csík-Danfalva község. But then you have a kind of other linguistic mark which is marking the whole institution in a certain sense in a superior manner than the official inscription, only in a monolingual way. And of course, there is also a secular flag there. So practically, why is interesting this? Well, look at this. Why is interesting this? Because this picture was published yesterday in the journals. There was a legally binding decision was made that Községháza, the inscription, should be taken down from that building. So practically, you can see that this type of piece of linguistic inscription was done. So practically what is doing it is, because in Székelyföld, this is a region largely inhabited by Hungarians, so practically you have compact regions, so several tens, even more than 100 municipalities neighboring each other with majority of Hungarians. They are using this, and they are using this Községháza inscription. Why? Very simple, because it's a particular historical region, and they are asking for more recognition than is granted by the law, offering some linguistic rights for Hungarian. They, for instance, are asking for form of territorial autonomy. They were even pressing for a kind of co-official status of Hungarian language in that regions. And practically, this linguistic mark, it is a form of expressing their aspirations to this. So they were writing, okay, there is the official inscription of the local council, but we will add something, a linguistic element in Hungarian, which is in a kind of a certain way we can call this, look here, this is a, I'm sorry, this is a kind of top-down regulation, respecting all the top-down regulation. It's bilingual, the order is respected, there's nothing added. So practically this is these are the good guys. But in this context, they are rebellious in a certain sense. They are not respecting if you are a representative of the state, they are not respecting the state-imposed linguistic order. For instance, this is this is a museum from Csíkszereda Merkurachuk, and here is not respected the order or the wording. The law is precise. They are saying that first is the Romanian inscription. They are not respecting the order. They are adding this type of községháza. You know what was interesting? The argument of the judiciary when they issued the compulsory removal of this inscription. Such institutions does not exist in Romania. I mean, községháza, it's true that if you translate the Romanian legislation, they're using the terms local council, mayor's office, so practically in legal terms, of course, you can find such things, but it is a form of a so-called hierarchical indexation. We will add this községháza, which is nonsensical in Romanian, but in a liberal state, of course, what is not forbidden, it is allowed. And they say that it's not interpretable in terms of administrative law, this terminology, regardless if it's written in two languages, községháza primaria, it doesn't mean primaria, it doesn't mean the mayor's office. In this way, it's mean totally different thing. Községháza, if you translate in English, it's mean community's house. So practically, it's emphasized the communal dimension of the institution and not the legal dimension of the institution. However, you have to take in view in order to interpret this removal, erasing, this adding to the buildings office and of another word, you have to interpret in this context that I highlighted. There is a strong tendency from the state regulator, from the top-down regulation of the linguistic landscape that is imposing a certain asymmetric equality, somehow preserving the primacy of the official language, and there is a bottom-up influence and the bottom-up attempting on behalf of the Hungarians to somehow add something more to emphasize the particularity of the region and to articulate in forms of relative, not problematic text the fact that this is belong to the community, not to the Romanian state. So practically, it is, you have to understand this. Of course, the judiciary could not make this decision that we know that actually what is the social meaning of this thing. And practically, they say that you have to remove because it have no meaning in Romanian. So practically, this institution does not exist according to the Romanian legal system. And what I'm saying, these are not exceptions. There are at least, I counted, so I'm telling the minimal count, so there are many more. Such cases of removal, there are already 35 municipalities were sued, charged, different administrative procedures started against them. So practically, it is not an exceptional issue. It is an ongoing process of removal, of remaking the top-down order of the linguistic landscape. Then the Hungarians will invent something else from that region. So practically, because also the so-called secular flags, which is the flag of this non-existing autonomous territory, it's posted, it's also removed by law. So practically, this is one aspect. You have this one type of thing. What is interesting, it is another strategy. And this strategy is in localities where Hungarians have a significant presence, but they are in minority in local level. What is called, I would call this type of strategies, it is in this type of thing in case of községháza inscription, it is redundant in an informational way. Yeah, if you have an inscription, if we say local council and city hall, then you have clearly indicating what is there. If you put községháza in Hungarian, you add in terms of information nothing more, but in symbolic terms, yes. But it's a hierarchical indexing, giving a different meaning to that inscription and to that locality. What is interesting here, for instance, this hierarchical indexing, this redundancy, it appears in Târgu-Mureș, Marosvásárhely, the place that I was studying is roughly half and half Hungarian and Romanian inhabitants, where there you have another interesting thing, redundancy. It's bibliothek, it's mean practically is county library. But what is interesting, you have a trilingual thing there. It's written there in Romanian, Hungarian, and English, and there you have a larger inscription that it is still the library there. So practically, it's hierarchically indexing the conventional trilingual thing. It's adding a larger one made from more solid material, and it's marking that it's still a Romanian place. So practically it is another strategy of doing this. But what is interesting, that the city that I was speaking about, where Hungarians represent roughly 20% of population, Cluj and Kolozsvár, well, after almost 2 decades of political pressure, fighting, different types of judicial procedures, the judiciary decided that, according to the law, the mayor should post out the bilingual inscription. So then the mayor what did? It's kind of multilinguistic access. What does that mean? Look here. Officially, he should post Cluj-Napoca, Kolozsvár. This is legal. He posted two more historical layers. It posted the German name of the city, and it posted the fact that it was established by a Roman emperor, so it's an ancient Roman city. So you have a Latin inscription. This is all within the official. So this is kind of multilingual access. It is not according to the administrative law. It is much complex. But why it is this done? It is simple. It is, the Hungarian language is present, but it's present not just 2 languages, Romanian and Hungarian, and by this highlighting the special status of Hungarians, but by evoking the fact that in this city it was a significant German presence few centuries ago. You add the historical layer of Klausenburg, and to add another historical layer which is totally out of any legislation, you add the fact that this city was founded by the Romans, and of course, as any historian, as anybody knows in Romania, Romanians are descendants of the Roman empires and the Romans who occupied those territories 1.5 millennia, 2 million years ago. So practically this multilinguistic access, for instance, it is against Hungarians which to be recognized as a kind of second inter pares, at least the second among equals, and somehow it is hiding this fact in this respect that is hiding. But on one hand, of course, this is much more than the fact that previously you had this type of monolingual inscription with greetings in any language but Hungarian. Practically, you may say that this is something more. You have there the Hungarian linguistic element, but you have the linguistic element with a kind of multilingual excess, so practically an exuberance of languages put there, so the Hungarian cannot say that, okay, we are Hungarians and Romanians who are in this city. So practically it is another strategy. Sometimes multilingualism in excess can hide different types of aspirations for recognition. So practically, I really don't know if I should, if I have more time, or I could jump to conclusions, because I have one more thing to say.
Please.
What is interesting, it is that I'm coming from a university in Cluj-Kolozsvár, where Hungarian language has extensive functions. It's a bilingual, it's a multilingual university, anyhow mostly bilingual, and it was created from unification of a separate Hungarian language and Romanian university. It's called Babes-Bolyai. So practically, I'm teaching at Hungarian section, so practically what I'm doing, we are speaking only Hungarians in the classes. We have our staff meetings only in Hungarian, and even persons who are, even the secretariat who's dealing with the Hungarian students speaks Hungarian. So practically, in terms of linguistic functions, we have extensive linguistic functions allocated, even if the status of the university recognize this type of right. Some students coming from this university can make their courses without knowing any Romanian, and they can participate in the full education. So in terms of linguistic recognition, practical linguistic recognition, there is a very large functions allocated to Hungarian. Its status, it's unclear. The university documents are not speaking very clearly that it's a bilingual or multilingual university. It's one among the languages used for teaching. Of course, after Romanian is the second largest, and the German and English language courses are incomparably smaller in smaller number, but anyhow, it is written in this way. But what is interesting, the total lack of inscription. There is a building in which it's located, the Hungarian Language Sociology Department, and in that building, the majority of the offices are occupied by teachers who are teaching at Hungarian language. Majority of courses are for Hungarian. So practically within this building, almost everybody speaks Hungarian. The whole process of education is going in Hungarian, but you will have there only in one language the education. And you have only, it's not very well seen, only in four language, again an excess of multilingual, greeting tables in which Hungarian used. So practically, to see what is interesting here, it is you have extensive linguistic rights, but it's refused to acknowledge in terms of public inscription de facto language use presence of a community. Why? Because again, Hungarians are wishing to be recognized as at least second inter pares and to be reflected such as. So sometimes too much more multilingual is there. You have on left in 4 or 5 languages greetings, in which is one of them. It is Hungarian. Again, it's a kind of aspiration that is not fulfilled. So practically, what I'm doing here, it is that you see linguistic landscape, different elements that I presented here. It's a part of a larger discourse. I don't know if you have a theory, linguistic anthropology. Well, the simple definition of discourse is text and some stuff. Some stuff that give a different meaning to the different elements of the text. How you can interpret this meaning. And what is interesting that these types of texts, bilingual texts, Hungarian language texts, are painted, are appearing in excess sometimes. Sometimes multilingual is produced in excess. So what is fantastic that you have a kind of linguistic project of linguistic order coming from top down. But you see, on the other hand, you have a dynamically changing force in which different actors are participating, are inventive in remodeling these types of top-down projected linguistic order. And within this, well, generally good intention, you see that what is a linguistic landscape is a dynamically changing battleground in the first. So what is fascinating with the linguistic landscape, it's ever changing. You don't have one linguistic landscape. You have a linguistic landscape which is indexical, and it reflects different aspirations that are surfacing from the bottom up and the reactions of different actors who are trying to stop this, drive this in a different other way. So from this perspective, we can consider it that linguistic landscape analysis, it is something that you can use to understand the relations not just between two languages, but between two communities, and the political context in which these relations are dynamically changing. Thank you very much for your attention.